Hi, everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of Vomitus. I am your host, Jennifer Ann Gordon, the award-winning author of Beautiful, Frightening, and Silent, as well as the Hotel series. I am joined today, as always, by my Vomitus vixens, Trisha Ridinger McKee, author of the Beyond series, as well as tomorrow, she has a book birthday for Through the Motions, the first of the Josie series. So happy early book birthday to Trisha.
Thank you.
We also have the lovely Allison Martine with us, author of the Bourbon books, hence why she's already sipping her bourbon.
That is my excuse.
Any excuse for the love of bourbon. We are joined today by an award-winning author, a famous actor, a British spy. See, I'm just going to make things up. A British spy. The voice of Salem on the original Sabrina. Bow down in your glory, Chris.
Yes.
Thank you. But you've also played Hamlet. You've had a career that is miles long when you look at your IMDb and read your bios. So thank you for being here. Tell our audience a little bit about you, your work, and this is when we drink.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you for the intro. Yes, I've had a very long, sometimes not so illustrious acting career. I've been all over the world doing it. As you can tell by the accent, starting out in the UK, ending up here. Now I'm on a small Gulf island it's called the Gulf Islands in British Columbia. So I haven't not a lot of opportunity for acting here these days. But I still keep my hand in, still do some shows. But mainly these days, of course, I'm an author. And actually, there's two strings to my bow these days. I'm an author, and I'm also an audiobook narrator, which has been a very, very useful thing to have. The word of the day is pivot, right? So this was such a useful pivot I made. I thought about it before the dreaded thing happened. And so I started buying equipment and stuff and started getting down to it. But it's been really useful.
You have a great voice, and we end up talking about audiobook narrators a lot on this show because we listen to a lot of Audible books, and we talk to a lot of authors, and we talk about their process in finding a narrator. So what is your setup like? Is it in like a crazy closet where you just go with your warm tea? And
I'm just about to leave the one space actually, but for the last 2 years, I've been basically inside a duvet fort. That's what it is. You just create duvets everywhere, lots of soft furnishings, and that's that dampens all the extraneous noise, and it's good. And I just set to and get the books done, and it's interesting. It's very interesting to me, partly because I'm not a particularly tech person. But I learned the tech required for this, and I found a great system called Hindenburg, actually, a Danish recording system. And it's really forgiving. And it's great. It's great. Very straightforward.
I'm just cracking up because you basically have now perfected the pillow fort, but for grown-ups, and made it a professional thing. That you're like, I have a professional pillow fort builder. It's with duvets.
Do you have to take the duvet fort down when you're done, or does the duvet fort just live in its own space?
The duvet fort's just lived there for 2 years. I'm just moving out of that space, so I'm going to have to recreate another. But it'll just be another duvet fort somewhere.
More duvets everywhere you go.
I love it.
Yeah, so,
I feel like that could make you an Instagram celebrity if you just started selfies in the duvet fort.
From the duvet fort, yes. Maybe I can do that.
Film little like TikTok videos live from the duvet fort.
Yes.
See?
You are. I need to get on board all these newfangled things, definitely. That's been a relatively late switch. Having been an actor for so long, about 20 odd years, well, actually slightly longer ago, I always wanted to write. Ever since I was a teenager, I wanted to write, and did write, but little bits and pieces, and would be full of enthusiasm for a project, and then realize quickly that after a few hours of enthusiasm, it wasn't like my great heroes writers, you know, and so I obviously haven't got the talent, so I better stop. And this is something I now teach. I teach writing a lot now. And the main thing I teach is process, is understanding the separate stages of the process. And so I didn't understand that to begin with, but I entered a playwriting competition. It was actually a 24-hour playwriting competition. You had to go into a room for 24 hours. In those days, you actually had to go. And I wrote this actually it ended up being a 2-act drama ripped from the headlines of my recent tragic love life. And I thought all I wanted to do was finish something, and I did. I finished it and then submitted it and thought no more of it. And then 2 days later, I found that I'd won the whole competition, which means they gave me money, $500.
Yeah.
Bloody hell, I'm a professional writer. And then B, they gave me a production the following year. So because theatre, you know, something I obviously understood, plays seemed like a reasonable thing to be writing. You know, I likened it later to a novel is a mountain and a play is a hill. You know? And I understood about that theatre process. So I wrote 2 more plays, but I always wanted to write fiction, particularly historical fiction. That's where I lived as a child and teenager and grew up just adoring the genre. And I'd had this idea for my first novel, but of course I thought, well, you know, it's an amazing idea. But the man who killed Anne Boleyn, I don't know if you know much about her. She's the second wife of Henry VIII, and he was very kind to his soon-to-be ex-wife. He brought a French swordsman over from France to do the deed because it was the much cleaner way of killing. Charming fellow, Henry. Anyway, I had this idea about, you know, what happened next, and so I made the first sort of, not mistake exactly, but something that I've never done since, which is I thought, well, I've obviously got to research everything about this before I start writing, and so I read book after book, and I'd say things like to myself, well, if ever I do write that book, which I probably won't, but if ever I do, it's obviously got to have a battle at sea between slave galleys, obviously. So I read a whole book about slave galleys. It's going to have a black mass in an archbishop's dungeon in medieval Siena, and I'll read about that. And gradually, over the years, I mean, literally took years, I'd acquired all this knowledge, and then finally, sort of 6-7 years later, I was back living in England by then. First sort of writing career had happened in Canada. I was staying in a country cottage, and I found this book on mercenaries, which, if ever I write this book, it'll have most of the characters will be mercenaries or former mercenaries. And I started reading the book, and I thought, this is ridiculous. I've just got to start writing this book. So I started writing it, wrote it really fast because it was all there. 95% of what I'd researched was actually not useful, but the useful bit was very useful. And I wrote it in 10 months, submitted it to one of the biggest agencies in the world, Curtis Brown in London. They took me on straight away and had it sold in 2 months to Orion, who are one of the top publishing houses in the UK, part of Hachette. And that was it. Not only did they give me a 1-book deal, they gave me a 2-book deal. So I suddenly had a commission to write another book, and then they liked those 2 quite a lot. French Executioner did very well, actually. It's still a bit of a cult novel. I'm going to reissue it soon because it's absolutely mad. It's not really historical fiction. It's more historical fantasy because the ghost of Anne Boleyn keeps popping up.
Love it. Oh my!
I'm there.
You had me at Ghost of Anne Boleyn.
Yes. Well, the premise being that on the eve of her execution, she begs him to take not only her head, but her 6-fingered hand, because she had 6 fingers in her hand. And get rid of it because it's going to be the mark of the witch, and it's going to be used against a child, and it's going to be, she's been used and exploited enough, no doubt. So he agrees to do it, and then buries at a crossroads in France by the next full moon. Which is,
and of course, wackiness ensues from there.
Lots of wackiness, because the novel opens with him, the executioner, Jean Rambeau, strung up in one of those gibbet cages. You know those metal cages?
I only know it from Willow, sorry.
There you go.
Valkiller.
Still counts.
There.
And the Archbishop.
Not historical fiction.
All right. And then the Archbishop of Siena rides cackling off into the night with the hand, leaving John to die. But of course, he's the hero, and he doesn't die, and he goes after, and he has to tell a story to the gibbet keeper to get out of it. He tells the story of why he took Anne Boleyn's hand. And anyway, it becomes this mad sort of chase. I look back at it now because people still love that book, and I'm aware that it's a really fun novel. I'm also aware that I've become a lot better writer in the 20 novels. It's really structurally it's a bit odd because it's a series of exciting incidents. It's all those things I'd read about, battle at sea between slave guns,
yes,
Bishop London, the Palio, So anyway, but that began the career, and then here we are, 21 novels later.
Gosh,
Wow.
so do you find? So I went to school for theater.
Wow.
And I did, I was an actor for, 5 or 6 years before life took a different turn. And I decided I'm going to be a painter. I'm going to be a writer. I'm going to be a dancer. And I've been all of those things. But like you, I always wanted to write. But I did theater for so long that I always, when I develop a character that I'm writing, I still develop it in the same way that I would be doing it if I was on stage. Do you find that you have a similar kind of process with your character development that an actor does, or is it completely different for you?
It's not completely different. It's very similar actually, but it's but like if you were rehearsing a play, and you had a reasonably long rehearsal process, you explore the character and get to know the character. I do that. That's how I write my novels. I will maybe have a, more or less idea of the plot. More or less, it doesn't necessarily have to be there. I never outline to begin with.
Good.
Panthers.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because I don't like my characters to be restrained by a plot. Eventually the plot and the character are going to, my favorite word in writing is oscillation. They're going to oscillate back and forth between the need for the plot, the drive of the character. In historical fiction case, of course, the history of the subject you're writing about. So I've written some huge subjects like the Siege of Constantinople or Vlad, which is my most successful book, I'm sure. It's the true history of Dracula, but not the vampire. See, so that is immensely complicated history, but that is going to give you a certain amount of structure. But so I just plow on through, and I get to know the characters as I'm writing them. And I like Jennifer with acting, you'll remember this. It's about characters in action. It's revealing themselves through what they do, and what they say is what they do sometimes as well. It doesn't necessarily mean they're telling the truth. And so I develop the characters that way. And then at the end of the first draft, I've got a pretty clear idea who they are. And that's when I do an outline for the first time. And I write down the chapters, and I write down the action, and I write down some notes. And I think, well, if that happens in chapter 7, then I've got to go back and plant that in chapter 1. And but that's the only time I actually start to coherently put it all down. Because by then, and then the characters are going to be, like, I'll give you an example. I wrote a novel called Plague, which, would you believe, is doing quite well at the moment. It's
one of the few people out there going, this pandemic has really been pretty good for my career.
Yeah. Oh no. Listen, there's many people who it's the last thing they want to read, and there's other people who they want to look at the history and know that we're not alone, or we went through similar stuff. Plague is a religious fundamentalist serial killer story set during the Great Plague of London in 1665, and I wrote the first draft of that, and there's sort of 3 protagonists in it. The main one, I suppose, being Captain Coke, who's a highwayman, severely traumatized by the English Civil War, very closed off, and gets falsely accused of these ritual murders because he robs a carriage, which he'd seen the people not 10 minutes before alive and well in a pub, and then he goes out to rob them, and he opens the door and they have been slaughtered, not just killed, they've been slaughtered. And so I wrote that whole first draft, and it's I got to the end of it and I read it through again, and I thought, yeah, Coke is, I love Coke, but he's very closed off. We need something else. And so I came up with with the sidekick, which of course is the great device for all writing. You know, it's one of my main things that I teach, bring in the sidekick. And so I found this boy, this what would be called in less politically correct times an idiot child. He's sort of cross-eyed and teeth all over the place, and he's starving on the streets and freezing to death. And Coke takes him in, and so his name, because up until very recently, I hope I don't get emotional here. My cat Dickon used to sleep on my desk, and so he became Dickon. This boy became Dickon. And Dickon is this great sidekick because he might be, you know, all over the place, but he's not stupid, and he loves his captain. You know, he sleeps at the end of his captain's bed, and he becomes the perfect foil. So that was an example of, you know, me going back over, and so I wrote that in, and of course changed the book. And the book then went on to win Best Crime Novel in Canada. So must have done something right.
Yay! I know you said a lot of words that I saw. I feel like I saw Trisha swoon when you said serial killer, and then swoon a little bit again when you said highwayman. I just was like, oh,
sorry.
It's okay. I was like, but I know you. So,
Yes.
Trisha, do you have any questions about serial killers you want to ask Chris? Or do you want to ask me about Salem the cat?
I was going there because with such a strong hold in acting, you've done so much with that, and now, you know, conquering the writing world. Do you find that when you're doing one, you kind of miss the other, or do you find that they're connected in a way that, you know, you're using your creativity?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. I mean, they're always overlapping. You know, if I'm going to be doing a play, it's not like I'm putting a book aside for that entire rehearsal performance period. You know, and of course, as you all know, being writers yourself, a novel exists not only on your computer or on the page; it exists in your head all the time. So all the time. So no matter how distracted you are or whatever, there's going to be a small part of your brain. I often think it's hard for our loved ones who aren't writers, because they don't quite get it. They don't quite get the fact that you'll just be sort of going, and they think you're gone, right? But you're actually,
Yes.
but yeah, you're in the story somewhere. And
Yes.
you know, the number of times I get up in the middle of the night and write a sentence down, you know, it's just because something has occurred. There's a funny story. It might have been me, but I'm going to claim it wasn't, just because I don't want to. When a young writer and his wife had their first baby, it was about it's 3 a.m, and the baby is in the full-on tearing jags every night, and they're both exhausted, and this baby starts crying, and the wife waits it out, and then leans over and jabs the husband in the side and says, "It's your turn." And the husband says, "Shh, I'm working."
Yes. We've all been there, whether it's a baby or something.
I don't know.
I think I just did that the other day. My lovely husband was trying to have a conversation with me, and I went, "I'm writing," but I was just sitting there doing nothing.
Yeah, my daughter says that. Yeah, she'll tell her friends, they'll tell me something, and I'm just looking, and she's like, she's writing. She's just ignore her.
You have to be committed to that world as well. You know, that's the thing. It's selfish.
Well, and Chris, I wanted to ask about the book that you just completed. I got to read the art copy of One London Day.
Well,
I started it but didn't finish.
I'm very excited because there's probably only 4 people on the planet who have read that book, and you're the 4th.
Am I number 5?
You're kidding.
You're probably 4 or 5. Yeah.
You're 4 or 5. Trisha and I are 5.5 and 5.7.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to
didn't finish it, but
you're talking about these characters, and I was trying to describe it and going through, well, what is it like? And things I was coming up with were things along the lines of Pulp Fiction, where you've got these different storylines and these people's lives who are splicing together at these moments that are pivotal. But I was hearing how you're saying, okay, so this other book that had one main character and then you brought in another character, what was the process like to even approach something where you've got kind of a smorgasbord of a cast?
Yeah.
Like One London Day. How did that start?
Interesting you asked that. One London Day is so different from my normal output, right? I realized a long time ago as an actor, and I've also realized it as a writer, that I get really bored acting the same part or writing the same book. You know, I'm just not interested. And I think both my careers, I mean, I did all right, don't get me wrong, but both my careers might have gone better if I'd played the one thing. Like, you know, when I started out in England, I was the quintessential English private school boy, you know, a bit like that, talking like this and blah, 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 and played some nice roles in that ilk. And then I got cast out of the blue as a Jewish gladiator who becomes Rome's top gladiator in this biblical Roman epic called Anno Domini. And suddenly I'm dark and, you know, I'm fully physical, and there's not a hint of the English public school. And it's the same with books for me. I'm not interested in writing the same book over and over. You know, if I did start writing an 18th century spy series, Jack Absolute. I loved him. I could have happily written more of him. But, you know, after 3 of them, I suddenly made a pivot, a choice to start writing. And it was actually, made the mistake of getting drunk with my editor in London. And he was the one who suggested Vlad as a subject. And I thought, oh, bloody hell, okay. And I tackled it. But it was, so to do something as radically different as One London Day, you know, is it a risk? I don't know. I wanted to write the book. I wanted to write it for lots of reasons. One is that it's where I grew up. That whole North London milieu, I understand it. I don't live there anymore. I love London. I write a lot about London. It is my city.
Have you gone back and found the gastropub has gone vegan?
Yes, that is true. That is true. I couldn't believe that. I thought, well, that's going on.
No.
Yeah, that's going
no
on.
steak and kidney pie. What?
Yeah, I know.
Years. Forget it.
Yeah, that's right. No, I was thrilled when that happened, because it's, you know, and that's where you snap, you pick up little things like that and they become a catalyst. So, I mean, I have written multi-narrator books before, particularly A Place Called Armageddon, my novel about the fall of Constantinople. I wrote it on both sides of the wall, Muslim and Christian, king and peasant, you know. But this was different because, as you say, it was, I like the idea of the pulp, I like the Pulp Fiction reference, by the way. I think that's really accurate. That these, you know, I'm interested in these worlds that collide with each other, and then for some reason it goes horribly wrong. And so I was really interested in that rather than your straight narrative. I mean, I got, you know, I'm publishing One London Day myself because I got rejected gloriously. I got the best rejection letters from every crime editor in London going, "Wow, this is amazing. This is so well written. It's a noir. It's blah, blah, blah." Just don't know what it is. You know, how do they sell it to marketing when there's no tag?
And that's something that you're really hitting the nail on the head, where if an editor or the publicist doesn't know what to do with it, they're kind of at a loss. And it doesn't matter how good it is or even the reputation of the author. They go, I don't know what to do with it. And I loved that it wasn't linear. And I know one of the books that I've written isn't linear either. And the book I'm writing now is linear because I'd like this one to sell. And that's exactly it, because that whole aspect, I love a non-linear storyline, and I think most readers are smart enough to follow it if you make it clear what's happening. I never got confused reading what you wrote. It was completely understandable, but I'm sure some people are going to go, well, these poor readers, they won't understand because, look, the date's right on there. It's not that hard to find. You can find where we are in the storyline. But to start with having something happen, an inciting incident, and then pull back more. So you're seeing behind the curtain further and further. I hadn't seen that done before, and it was glorious.
Right.
I've seen it on a show, but I've never read that. I've never read that kind of linearity or that kind of drawing back the camera further and further from that starting point and to see how we got there.
Thank you. Well, that's great to hear because, you know, I remain uncertain how it will be received. Because there will be all those people who want to go, you know, it doesn't, you know, it's not this and it's not that, and rather than reading it for what it is. You know, I'm it goes back to being an actor, of course, as well. But I'm most interested in character. You know, in any book. You know, it's why we read. Let's face it, we get into the characters. I mean, yes, we want a cracking plot and blah, adventures and dastardly villains and all that, but we really want. I'm very interested in human frailty. You know, the idea that a man like Joseph Severin, who's sort of the core of the novel, could,
Yes.
you know, who's absolutely straight. You know, he's so straight. He's had his life is straight now. He had a bit of a wild youth, but you know, and the whole life gets turned upside down by the glimpse of a young woman's back in the sun. You know? And I think that's that to me is, you know, it's happened the odd time in my life. You know, something just entirely left field comes along and just changes your world, and then, you know, it's that daisy chain of characters, those repercussions, and yeah.
Well, and the theater reference, and this is something I had shared with Jen, was the Blue Room. There's something of the Blue Room in there as well. Now, obviously, since you were writing this as a novel and not as a cast for 2 actors, 5 actors, however many, and sometimes they do end up that there's more than 2 on a stage at a time, so you can't exactly do it with a 2-person cast, but the similar idea where you've got these people who seeing their lives link up and link up and link up, and people, one exits and the next one comes in, and you see how they interconnect in ways that you would never expect.
Yeah.
It was beautiful. So I'd say Pulp Fiction meets Blue Room. There's your pitch.
Fantastic. I should grab it. I should grab it. I've got Blue Room up here.
One of my favorites.
Blue Room is, of course, drawn itself. It's an adaptation of an Arthur Schnitzler play called La Ronde.
Exactly. It's French, isn't it?
Viennese, actually.
It's Viennese?
Viennese, yeah. Schnitzler was a Viennese writer. Very fascinating man. That extraordinary period, just from 1900 before the war, destroyed their whole world. But he wrote this scurrilous play because it's all about, you know, this person has sex with this person.
It's all sex.
It's sex.
It's a daisy chain of sex. Exactly. That's what it is. Yeah.
I did scene studies from that my senior year in school.
Now, see, I sat through a very uncomfortable college production of that because I'm looking at kids who I'm going, you are not old. I don't want to see any.
Yeah. No. So Nicole Kidman famously did it in London.
Yes.
And I think it was after she had done that this college production thought, ooh, this is all the rage now. And I just thought, I am glad I'm not any of your parents.
Yeah.
So Chris, do you have a favorite role you've ever performed? Is it Salem the cat?
That's Jen's favorite role of yours. Just
yes.
No, I
would be part of this as the cat.
I did. I wanted to ask that, but
Salem was obviously a pivotal moment in my career, though it literally boiled down to 4 hours in a studio in Vancouver with a director on a phone patch in Los Angeles, with him going through the script with me and giving me notes, and I just stood at a microphone for 4 hours and put this cat down. So delightful though it was, and though it's quite the credit, because people like you, oh my God, you're an original Salem, it didn't last that long. I mean, I've played a number of amazing roles. I've been really blessed. The one on particularly on television that I loved was playing Caleb in Anno Domini. I mean, that took me to Tunisia for 10 months. You know, I've always been quite a physical guy, particularly, you know, I fell in love with the swords and weaponry.
You got to be a gladiator. I think I would rather be a gladiator for 10 months than a cat for 4 hours.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah, no, it was amazing. And I did things, you know, and I'm a history nut, right? So I actually filmed in a real Colosseum in North Africa. We filmed where they fought, you know. It was weird, but it was also exciting. So there was that. And that also, I mean, for better or worse, that hijacked my career and took me to Hollywood for a couple of years. And so, you know, which every actor wants to do. Every actor sees that opportunity. It didn't work out the way I wanted it to in the end, which was fine. So I went back to England and back into theatre. But speaking of course, the role that changed my life. I mean, that changed my sort of career, Caleb. But the role that changed my life was Hamlet.
that I was wondering. That's what I wanted you to say. Like, talk to me about Hamlet.
Playing Hamlet, yeah, it changed everything. It was a time in my life when I was a bit lost, I think, and My dad had died just a few years before, so to be doing a play about fathers and sons was, and especially as the actor who played my father, it kind of had my father's eyes as well, which was interesting. And I discovered quite rapidly that Hamlet is the sort of ultimate straight role. You know, whoever your Hamlet is, it's you basically. And it's not that I do a lot of method acting and using my own past that much, but you work with what you have. The other thing about it was that it was a peculiar circumstance, and I did it because the production. I was what's called the alternate Hamlet. So the main actor in this production didn't want to play Hamlet on matinees. The fool. So the director brought me in, which meant that was great in one sense. I got to play Hamlet, but not so good because all the things that I was promised in terms of the odd rehearsal all went. I didn't get to rehearse. So I became this, and I did this with Caleb as well. When a role demands a sort of physical commitment, so I like the odd pint and stuff, but I gave up drinking. I upped my running. I started going to the gym a lot because I was in Calgary. It was freezing as the winter, so I used to go to the gym. I rode the bike to Olympian level. I was so fit, but it was just me and the words all the time. And it was extraordinary experience because I didn't really have a director, so all I had were the words, and that's what it's about. Hamlet is words. Yeah. Sounds a bit odd to say, but it is, and so that, and it not only was it an extraordinary experience to play it, but it also philosophically changed my life in terms of that belief in what one can or can't do, and how much control one has, and what is action and what is just being, and and I go back to it all the time, and it really does. It colors my life on an almost daily basis. So.
Yeah, that was really beautiful what you just said. What is action and what is just being.
Mm-hmm. I just can't even imagine, though, having to step into a role where everyone else has been rehearsing with someone that isn't you, but then doing that on a regular basis where it's matinees, it's me, but it's somebody else in the evening, and them having to react to you and not the other man.
Well, that's the thing. And that's the joy of live theatre. Yes. When I walked out on that stage the first time, having had barely a dress rehearsal, I mean, it wasn't even a proper one. And I walked out there the first time and I started hyperventilating. I was terrified. Never in my life have I thought this is the moment they come and take me away in a white. I was so scared. And I couldn't breathe properly. And I was sort of breathing. And then I thought, listen, because I thought this is it. And then I thought, no, listen to what's he saying? What's he saying? And then as soon as he finished talking, I started talking. And it was like stepping onto a roller coaster. And literally, I stepped off 3.5 hours later. So
I also just can't believe that they would have cast somebody who just said, "I don't do matinees." Is that common, or was that kind of just a weird thing? Was this guy just they were bowing at his feet?
I wouldn't have said it was common. It's not uncommon.
Because I've seen a lot of theater in matinees because poor. And so I've seen a lot of the matinees instead of the lead actors, and you get all the inserts that say instead of, and you get everybody instead of the leads. I just thought I always was going on bad days, but maybe that's just standard that you're getting someone else for them matinees.
It's not standard. No, it really does vary. But it was, thank God he did. Here's a funny story about that, though. The production had a lot of problems, which is one of the reasons the director didn't direct me. And in the preview week, he cut the entire first scene, which is like painting a mustache on the Mona Lisa, I think. But and part of the problem was it was running too long. The whole thing was running really long. And part of the problem was, I'm not going to mention the other actor because I don't want to badmouth him. He was a perfectly nice guy, but he didn't really grasp the verse. And instead of just, Hamlet tells you how to play Hamlet, speak the speech as I pronounced it to you, trippingly on the tongue. It doesn't require you. Shakespeare doesn't require you to hang around and think about saying something and then saying it. What Shakespeare requires you to do is to say it.
Say the lines, guys.
Say the words.
Say the words. And so when I
love that. Sorry.
So when I did it, I came off And I thought the tech crew were looking quite, we were all friends of mine anyway. They were all like, hey, well done, mate. I was like, oh, thanks. Yeah, no, really well done. We're off the pub. And I went, what? I took 17 minutes off the show.
Oh, wow. Okay. And I can't imagine that they were noticing it was running long and that nobody considered the pacing of the speeches or this downtime between. So if there's that lag, rather than, oh, let's cut a scene, because I didn't think you were even allowed to do that with Shakespeare. Like someone would come out.
Oh, you can.
And go, no.
Yeah, no,
that's like the Bible. That's
you can.
pure sacrilege.
Right.
That's why it's so rare to see things like Henry V and it's full. Like
well,
they'll split that up over a couple days. But
That's right. So anyway, but it was an amazing time, amazing opportunity. And of course, it's factored in. I mean, I ended up writing a novel called Shakespeare's Rebel, which is about William Shakespeare's fight choreographer at the time that Will is writing Hamlet. And so I was trying to derive, further explore that world of why Hamlet then, why Hamlet in 1600 basically, and what was going on. And so and my main actor, my protagonist in that is called John Lawley, and he's a brilliant swordsman, not a bad actor, but a raging drunk. And so he keeps getting booted out of the Lord Chamberlain's den. He's trying to reform, but he gets caught up in the Earl of Essex's rebellion, which is the last great rebellion against Elizabeth. And so it's a political, theatrical, family, fathers and sons again, love story, sword fighting story.
Why is this not a movie?
Indeed.
yeah. Get on now.
Shakespeare in Love. I would rather see Shakespeare with the fight choreography and the rebellion and all that. That I volunteer.
Yeah,
like
good. Well, get the word out there.
Yeah, we'll spread that. We'll spread the rumor that it's somebody's already considering it, and then people will go, oh, well, maybe I should consider doing that.
Yeah, rumors.
I think we've got the same publicist. Let's have him put that out there into the world. Chris.
Get him on it. Well, and I wanted to. Oh, go ahead, Jen.
Oh no, I was just going to say, why the unicorn tapestries in the cloisters? What about that? Were you a child when you developed a fascination for these tapestries?
No. What happened was I was trying to figure out what to write next. My editor in Knopf in New York, I'd written 3 young adult sort of Earth magic books called the Runestone Saga, and she got in touch and said, "Yeah, I want another book from you." And I'd kind of done I hadn't thought of ever writing fantasy, and I went, I don't know. And she said, "No, we'll give you a contract." And I went, "Okay." And so I'm usually sitting there in my office going, what am I going to write about? What am I going to write? Why do I have a unicorn on my finger? Because I do. So can you see that? I don't know how I can. Oh, there you go.
I can see it.
I'm not wearing my glasses. I can't see it.
I'm Jen seeing eye dog. So yes, Jen, it's a unicorn ring.
It's a unicorn.
I've read about the unicorn ring.
It happens to be my family crest. This is my dad's ring. I got it when he passed. I just started wondering about what a unicorn meant. What it literally meant. Why do I have this symbol on? I've worn this symbol on my person since I was 21 years old. What does that mean? So I started researching that. One of the first things that came up, well, apart from the fact that it's unconquerable except by a maiden. I thought maidens, unicorns, good combo. And then I found the unicorn tapestries in New York. Have you guys ever seen them?
Yes,
that's why I not in person, and they're gorgeous. But I would love to get to see them.
Oh, they are amazing, and they blew my mind. And the whole idea of weaving, kind of as a metaphor for writing as well. And the great thing is that no one knows who made them, when they were made, where they were made. All they know is they were really expensive, but there was this whole mystery around them. And so I came up with this idea that it was in fact my protagonist, Elaine, her ancestor was the weaver who wrote them. Sorry, who wrote them. And so I came up with this idea that there was actually the weaver had woven a doorway for the unicorn to pass back from our world, where all the beasts used to live, until it got too hot, and then they all moved back to Gollancz, the land of the fabulous beast. And Moonspill the unicorn, had the Weaver's daughter, the original Weaver's daughter, 500 years before, Alice Elaine, had promised that if he ever really needed her or her descendants would come. And so he really needs her. And so he summons her through. But of course, this is present day Manhattan Girl. She's like, what the hell do I know about you? What do I know about manticores, except they're trying to eat me now, and this sort of stuff. So it became like the wardrobe in Narnia, that I go to from one world to the other. And and it just spooled up from there. I had a blast writing it. It's because that was the first time I'd really, even though we crossed back and forth between the worlds, that was the first time I'd really dabbled in the purely fantastical, the fantastic beasts, basically. Fabulous.
But there's still a bit of history there when you're dealing with the lineage and all those same themes. And kudos, I heard you slip in the word spool back. Nice tapestry reference. I did notice.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I hate to cut us off, but we are out of time.
Oh,
Chris, you were delightful, and I'm proud of myself that I didn't make you do the Salem voice.
I don't think I can remember what it's like, actually. So I know.
Well, then you'll have to come back. That was so bitchy of me. I'm like, well, then you'll have to come back.
We'd like you to come back, but
like
you're still not going to be required to be Salem, the little black cat.
You don't have to do it the whole time, but
I could give you screeds of Hamlet, but Salem is kind of gone.
Yeah, it's understandable. Thank you, Chris, for being here. Thank you, everybody who is watching live or watching on the replay. Please check out Chris's website and all of his work. Thank you to my Vox Vomitus Vixens, as always. Thank you to Roman Siriton, our producer, and thank you to Pam Stack, our executive producer. Stay tuned for next week. We have Jennifer McMahon, New York Times #1 best-selling author, and she is here the day after her new book is released, The Drowning Kind, which I started last night, and it's fantastic. So that will be next week. Until then, we will see you all later. This has been a copywritten podcast for the Global Authors on the Air Network. And once again, Trisha, happy book birthday tomorrow.
Thank you.
See you next week. Waving.